السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, today we'll not summarize but go through some of the benefits that we learned in Surah Al-Hashr. Surah Al-Hashr, Surah number 59. And when it comes to benefits and things that we learn, it never ceases, it never stops. And the more the person gains knowledge, the more the person gives from one's time and one's effort to the book of Allah, the more that he would receive benefits in his heart and his actions beyond what we imagine. And this is where you cannot really know the taste of something unless you taste it. So you have to really take the means and to put it into actions. So without repeating the things that we mentioned before about the surah, otherwise many things are mentioned in this beautiful surah, Surah Al-Hashr, but some of the benefits that the ulama, they stated in the books of Tafseer, and it's only some of them because of the time. And this can be, means for us, inshallah ta'ala, to expand and to have more and more. But you see from the beginning of the surah, and this is with the surahs that starts with the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to exalt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our hearts. And the tasbih of Allah, stating that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most perfect and there's no deficiencies and weaknesses in his names and attributes, in his commands, in his deen, right? And it's in the creation of Allah. And if the creation of Allah and the life that we live in, we think has many different things that are weaknesses or deficiencies or things that it doesn't feel good, or things that's scary, or things like this, it is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it perfectly for the objectives of it. This is not the Jannah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, and it's created now, and it's present now, and it's in the hereafter for the believers. This is not the Jannah, this is the earth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth in certain way. And He created us to live our life on the face of earth according to the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth. So this is perfect. Perfect as far as the actions of Allah. And that's why the believers, they witness that with their tasbih in their hearts. So unlike the disbelievers. So why there is cold and heat and sufferings and bloodshed, the relationship between human beings to one another, there's so much evil there. And even the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this life with the summertime and the winter time and cyclones and earthquakes and pleasant things and all kinds of things. This is how perfectly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this life. So we see that in the subject of the tasbih. Everything makes tasbih to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something that should be established in our hearts. And also in the way that that governs the life of the human beings. The rise and fall of nations, the relationships between the disbelievers and the believers, and the ways of Allah that never changes, that we see in the story of Bani Nadir that is mentioned in the surah, or the stories of the prophets, or what's happening in our time. The believers, the more they gain the knowledge, the more they would see how perfect is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. So this is a great benefit that is common to all of the surahs of the Quran. The subject of Bani Nadir and how they were expelled from Medina, and how their situation changed from having strength to be weak. All of that is because of their evil actions and because of the steadfastness of the believers. For people to take a lesson from this, and that at the end is what matters. And if people, their hearts are attached to this worldly benefit, they will fool themselves. And why the people of Bani Nadir were defeated? Because their opposition to the deen of Allah. If they would have believed in Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would have had the most pleasant life in this life and in the hereafter. That's why the companions radiallahu anhum, when they were in their weakest state in this life, they were superior with their iman, with their faith. And they were never upon the feelings of those who are oppressed in the land where they feel miserable. No, the believers are always superior with the izzah, with the superiority of al-iman and faith, and understanding the purpose of their life and looking into the actions of Allah. And how also that from the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and to the believers, if something that happens as a mistake or a weakness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiver. But especially for those who do the best they can to do things in the upright way, but then things happens, as when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions, when they took some of the palm trees that is fruitful as means to in the war against the people of Bani Nadir. Also from these benefits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the surah, when it comes to some of the rulings of the booty of the war, and the believers, they got to learn the different types of what they take from their enemies and how it's to be distributed. Also the obedience of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to follow his way. وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. And anything the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam brought to you, you take it. Anything that he forbade you from, you stay away from. And this is a general rule that governs the life of the believers. One of the great benefits that we learn from the surah, the three categories of the believers, that if a person is not in one of them, he is in a great danger. And for him to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person should be in one of these categories. The first two, by the qadr of Allah, no one can be among them because they passed away, which is al-muhajirin wal-ansar. And the third one is those who followed them with goodness, and that's what is left for us. But the virtues of the muhajirin and the ansar, and this is great meanings that we learned in the surah, of the characteristics of the muhajirin and the characteristics of al-ansar. How the sincerity, the truthfulness, and giving victory to the deen of Allah, this is their concern, even if it would make them leave their wealth and their families, and they left everything for the deen. The deen is worth it for a person to sacrifice everything for it. And this is how the muhajirin was praised. And the ansar and their ithar, choosing others over themselves in things that only one or the other will attain. And the ithar is different than loving for your brother what you love for yourself. It's a higher level, right? So if you have bread and you want to have also people to have bread, mashallah, this is great, and this is such a virtuous thing. You don't love for your brother, you love for your brother what you love for yourself. But al-ithar, which is a higher level of virtue, is that you have only one piece of bread, or you have what is sufficient for yourself. So either you have it or your brother will have it. So you will choose your brother over yourself. That means you won't get anything of it. And this is what al-ithar is. And al-ithar, if it's in matters of deen, no ithar. No ithar in matters of deen. That means, if someone wants to do a good deed, you want everybody to do the good deed. But if it's only one person that would do it, right, you would compete with others to make sure that you would do it. So the competition means that you want to be first. And that is in matters of deen. But the virtue of al-ithar, as we heard the story of the Ansari and how the verses were revealed, and how the Ansar did to the Muhajirin, the people of Medina, how did they do with the Muhajirin, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purified their hearts from any greed and any stinginess in their hearts, and they were so generous. And generosity does not require for the person to have wealth. Generosity is in the heart. When a person has this goodness in his heart, that he would even give to others what he would deprive himself from, which also shows the warning against greed and stinginess in one's wealth, in one's time, in one's ability to benefit others. And that's one of the intentions of even learning the deen of Islam, so that you would extend that benefit and this generosity to others, which is the highest level of generosity, when a person would give others what the ilm of the deen of Allah. When we see the ignorance widespread, and people are upon haram or bid'ah or shirk and so on, then where are the believers, those who would take the matter serious to learn the deen, so that they would eliminate these types of things by educating the people, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And that Muslims, they are in need, and non-Muslims, they are in need of those who are righteous in themselves, and they are sincere in spreading the truth more than anything else, more than they need all of the physical benefits in this life. So shuh, and the level of greed and stinginess and so on. As also we learned that people are in levels, and how that those who came after them, they also always mention as followers. We follow the best generations. We follow the Muhajirin. We follow the Ansar. We follow of course, before that, the Prophet ﷺ, because the Muhajirin and the Ansar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with them because they followed the Prophet ﷺ. We learn some of the general things in the surah, that when it comes to the disbelief, the disbelievers will be all united when it comes to opposing the truth and the believers. The disbelievers are not united, and they are never united, and their hearts are against one another. They have enmity towards one another, except if their objective is the believers, they would be united against the believers with this, even with the hypocrites. And the hypocrites are their brothers. So as they say, Al-Kufru millatun wahida. Al-Kufr is one religion with all different false beliefs, but they become one when they oppose the believers. And the hypocrites and the characteristics of the hypocrites and the people of the book being cowards, and because the fact that their hearts is not relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in their hearts the fear of other than Allah, and the fear of the believers, and so on. And even though they might look physically that they are united against you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their creator, He informs the believers that their hearts is full of enmity towards one another. And the greed in their hearts, and each one wants what is benefiting for his own self alone, and so on. Comparing that to how the companions radiallahu anhum were upon this ithar and this goodness towards one another, whether they are weak or strong. Also, the surah warns us from the ways of the shaitan. And the shaitan, his ways explained clearly in the surah, and how that he tried to deceive the people by adorning the evil for them. And once they fall into the evil, the shaitan, he distanced himself from the people. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about the ways of shaitan. And so the warning against the hypocrites, the warning against the ways of shaitan. And this is the beauty, as we said, of the Quran, how it gives us everything in its real way and form, so that nobody would say, I didn't know. And the tricks of shaitan, the ways of shaitan. Also the benefit, and this is the call in the surah to the believers to fear Allah, and to look of what we had sent forth in the hereafter with our actions, and to fear Allah, to be dutiful to Allah, and to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His names and attributes, and with the command of Allah, the command to do things, the command also to stay away from things. And the very powerful verse, do not be like those who nasu Allah fa'ansahum anfusahum. Do not be like those who forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as a result of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them forget themselves. And we talked about how a person forgets himself is by not doing the things that is benefiting for oneself. You might think that you're living a goodly life. You're getting whatever you desire. You have a wealth. You have the fulfilling your desire in every single matter. But you're forgetting the purpose of your life. You're forgetting what is benefiting for you. You stay away from the ibadah of Allah. You don't taste the sweetness of the humbleness and the ibadah, the worship of Allah, and standing at night to make salah or to make dhikr or to read Quran or so. This is all forgetting themselves or oneself. How the surah, and this is in the entire Quran, takes us to the hereafter to show us the reality of this life. So the people of the fire are not the like of the people of Jannah, because the people of Jannah are the successful ones. If the hearts are not attached to this, then the person would not be steadfast on the deen of Allah. The importance of the Quran and the words of the Quran are amazing when it talks about these matters. And there's nothing better than the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explaining the importance of the Quran, how if it was brought down on a mountain, it would make the mountain split, all of that by the power of the words of Allah. And it's supposed to be in the hearts of the believers. And the hearts of the believers need to be purified. And it shows, by the way, since the Quran, if it was to be brought down on a mountain, it would break the mountain, right? And when the place of the Quran is the heart, that means there's an essence here of the diseases in the hearts that the Quran eliminates. These diseases are as hard as the mountains, and the Quran would come down and break it. So whether it's shirk, associating partners with Allah, arrogance, envy, the attachment to this worldly, the greed of this life, all of these evil things in the heart, it's like rocks. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He described the hearts of the disbelievers, that is, their hearts is like a rock, or even harder than a rock. So what would you remove? How would you remove a rock from its place? By the Quran. By the Quran. By constantly being attached to the Quran and reading Quran and reflecting upon the Quran, it removes these evil things in the heart, that it's like a rock that you want to remove. So the strength that the believers gain is by the Quran. And that's why this methal, or this parable that Allah gave, He gave it to us for us to reflect upon it. And then the end of the surah, when it talked about the names and attributes of Allah, the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is like as if this is what removes all of these evil things in the heart. And that's to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His names and attributes the way it's mentioned in the Quran. We know that we said we need to get to know the names and attributes of Allah and give a series of lectures of this. The best way to learn the names and attributes of Allah, not to mention them one after the other in a list and even looking into them, which is nothing wrong with that. But the best way to learn the names and attributes of Allah is by reading and explaining and having the tafseer of the Quran, and to have that patience in learning them whenever the names of Allah are mentioned in the Quran and the surahs, that you would learn what does it mean, and in that context, how the effect of it would be. And this is how you see all these names that are mentioned in the surah related to the Quran, and how that is within the Quran, it purifies the hearts of the believers. So this is a subject that we need to go through and to expand on the meanings of these names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the attributes of Allah. And that everything belongs to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with these names and attributes of Allah. Believe in them, do not distort the meanings of them. And the importance of the aqeedah, the belief, how it shapes the person and make him firm upon the deen of Allah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us firm upon the deen of Allah, and to make the Quran is the comfort of our hearts, and to make us among the people of the Quran. Barakallahu fikum. And again, this is just some. And inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow we'll start, or we continue with the next surah, which is Surah Al-Mumtahina. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.